2021. Our Torah portion is Shemot, the first of the book of Exodus, the opening of the book of Shemot, the aforementioned book. And we have a lot to talk about. So yesterday, if you recall, we began with the slavery story, the origin story of slavery. How does it move? How do we go from things being relatively okay, life being okay for the Jewish people in Egypt, to there being just this horrific condition of slavery? The answer is it happens slowly, but it also happens through fear, cynicism. It happens through prejudice. It happens through dictatorship. It happens in a lot of different ways. And it's a cautionary tale for all of humanity and for history. But it happens. It happens slowly. It happens over time. There's a new king, whether that's literally or figuratively, a new king who doesn't know Joseph, who doesn't care about the Jewish people, who is, I don't know if he's actually concerned or if he's just saying that to rile up the people. Either way, either he is paranoid or he wants to get people paranoid. Jewish problem, too many Jews. What if they join our enemy and destroy us from within? It's going to be terrible. So they put decrees. They put decrees of harsh labor. When that doesn't work, they add decrees of infanticide, killing the boys. When that doesn't work, they decide to kill all of the Egyptian boys born that one day, as we discussed yesterday. Well, that fateful day, Moses was born. And Moses was cast into the Nile River. And we said yesterday, I'm pulling up the text here, I'm sure you can see it, how he's placed, his mother Yocheved can no longer hide him after his birth. And the reason is, by the way, because he was born prematurely. He was born a few months early. So they knew when everybody was expecting, and they knew to come back, circle back and make sure that no baby boy were being born or living beyond birth. So she knew that the soldiers or whatever, the officers, whatever they called themselves in Egypt, were going to circle around. So she could no longer hide him after a few months. So she took him, placed him to a basket, and put him to the Nile River. Okay, we said this yesterday, but I also told you yesterday that we're going to rewind a little bit and do some stuff that we missed or that we didn't delve into deeply. So here's a few things. Number one, his sister stood from afar to know what would be done to him. This is Miriam, his oldest sister. Again, it was 3 kids in the family, Miriam and her younger brother, Aaron, and then Moshe or Moses. So 3 kids, Miriam, Aaron, and Moshe. So the big sister is standing by the water. I guess the mother puts him in the basket on the Nile River and goes away. She's probably distraught. Sister stays there. By the way, later on in the Torah, we read about an episode where you might remember this, where Miriam spoke a bit of a gossipy way about her brother Moshe to her brother Aaron. So Miriam to Aaron, what's with Moses? He's separated from his wife. It was because Moses was experiencing prophecy, and so he wanted to be always ready on call for God. I'm not going to get into that story, but the point is that she was afflicted, if you recall, with leprosy, with tzarat. And the Torah says that the entire camp waited for her until she was healed. And our sages tell us it was in reward for her waiting for her brother that the entire people waited for her. So in the merit of her waiting, she was waited for. So a few messages, a few lessons from that. Number one, all good deeds have a positive effect and come back to us. So even if it seems like a small gesture, a small deed, a small act of courtesy, it goes a very long way, and it always ultimately benefits us. In addition to being the right thing, it actually does benefit us. That's one message. Another message, though, is this notion of standing from afar to know what will be done to him. And that is the idea that we have to be there for each other. You know, what was she going to do? Here's a baby in a basket on the Nile River. What's she going to do? Jump in? You know, rescue the child herself and bring him back home, and then what? And then the Egyptian authorities are going to come anyway, and God forbid. So what's her point? The point is that the child should not be alone. The child should not be alone. Even if there's nothing she can do, the child should not be alone. That's a beautiful thing. To care about someone, even if we can't help, even if we can't fix the problem, but to let them know that you are not alone. I am standing near you. I'm standing near you, and I'm with you. Powerful gesture, powerful significance, powerful lesson for us. Now, that's one thing I wanted to add that we didn't discuss yesterday. Second point that I wanted to add is Pharaoh's daughter. So Pharaoh's daughter, by the way, what was her name? Her name was Batya. Batia, Batya. Batya went down to the Nile River to bathe. And according to the commentaries, it wasn't just bathing. Some say she was actually dipping in the Nile River mikvah, so to speak, using it as a mikvah to convert to Judaism. But we'll leave that. That's an idea that's discussed, but I'll leave that for maybe another discussion because it's an interesting angle on it. Either way, she sees the basket. So what does she do? Now, the translation doesn't really do justice to this. It says she took it. She sent her I'm sorry. It says she sent her maidservant and she took it. That's one translation. That's not the only translation. I'm going to refer to the Hebrew. Batishlach es amasa batikacheha could also mean she stretched out her arm and she took the basket. And amasa, which could mean her arm, could also means ama al ama, as Rashi says, her arm actually magically extended because it was out of arm's reach from her. Take a look at Rashi. I'm going to show you this Rashi. Rashi says her maidservant. Hebrew is amasa, which means her maidservant. However, our sages in the Talmud interpret it as an expression meaning a hand or an arm. So the joint from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger is known as amma. By the way, in Talmudic language, so from here, the elbow to the end of the longest finger is called an amma. It's a measure of length. So we call that typically in English cubit. I don't know why it's called a cubit. I don't know if that means anything other than in Talmudic translation language, but a cubit is pretty much from here to here. It's typically understood as about a foot and a half, about 18 inches. Fine. That's a little bit of halachic measurements. So that's known as an amma. Hence the cubit measure bearing the name amma, which is the length of the arm from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. So following the rule of Hebrew grammar, however, let's continue in Rashi. It should have been vowelized amasa with a dagesh in the mem. They, however, interpreted it as amasa to mean her hand, that she stretched out her hand and her arm grew many cubits, amos, so that she could reach the basket. Okay, listen, we don't have time or the foundation to do a deep dive into Hebrew grammar right now. But here's what I want to point out. I want to give you the bottom line. The Talmud says that what happened here is she stretched out her hand and her arm grew many cubits. In other words, it extended. Think of Pinocchio of the nose. This is what Pinocchio's nose does. Her arm is doing. Her arm is stretching out. And miraculously, she's able to rescue the child. That's the core idea that I wanted to share with you. But we're not done yet. Because the next question is, if that's the case, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so I can see you. If that's the case, if what's the case? If the truth is that she was not able to reach the child by stretching out her hand, again, I'm going to say this one more time. If the basket was all the way further in the river, and by reaching out her hand, there's no way that she could actually reach the basket without it happening, so why did she reach out? How did she know a miracle was going to happen? Understand my question? So the Talmud says she stretched out her hand and it extended to grab the basket. I'm asking the obvious question. Why did she even try if it was all the way down there? What, that was a normal occurrence for her? Why did she even try? There's a beautiful answer given. I forget which scholar, Rabbi, Rebbe says this answer. It's so beautiful. And I try to live with this, throughout the year. What's the message? The message is, even when we think we can't reach, we have to try. Even when we think it's too big, it's too far, it's too lofty, it's too difficult, that does not absolve us from trying. We must try and extend our effort to the utmost possible, and then be what it may after that. But we have to do our hishtadlut. We have to do our effort. Such an important message in life. Sometimes we won't get it done. Sometimes we will get it done. It does not absolve us from stretching out our hand. So, for example, we think about the problems of the world. So, how to prevent hunger, or how am I going to fix it myself? So sometimes we get so dissuaded by the fact that we can't fix the whole problem, we can't reach the end of the problem, that we don't even bother stretching out our hand even a little bit. The message here is from Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh, that even if you can't finish, even if you can't fix it, you got to start. Take a step, reach out your hand. First step, first action. What's the Chinese proverb? A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, something like that. The journey of 10 cubits begins with a single cubit, right? We're rounding up or down. Positive energy, exactly. We have to extend and put it out there, and hopefully a miracle will happen, or something that we didn't anticipate. You don't want to call it a miracle. We didn't realize that if we would have done that, if we did that when we did it, that it would cause a ripple effect and it would get done. But even if not, we still have to do it because it's the right thing. So Batya extends her arm, and miraculously she's able to collect the child. Now, the Torah says she realizes that it's a Jewish kid. I think in the movie 10 Commandments, or one of those films, it's been many, many years, I think there was idea of a blanket. He had a Hebrew blanket, an Israelite blanket. I don't know if that's how she knew. Maybe she knew because the kid had a bris milah, a circumcision. I don't know. I don't know that that there's any definitive commentary on that. If there is, then maybe we'll explore it or find it at some point. But just so she recognizes a Jewish kid, and she is driven to rescue the child, which is a big deal. I wanted to mention also something before. When it says, sorry to go backwards a little bit, something I didn't mention yesterday. So when Moses was born, it says that his mother saw that he was good. What does that mean, that he was good? Rashi explains that he was born circumcised. He was born with a bris milah. He was born circumcised. And that means holy and special and everything. Now, by the way, halacha would say if a child, for however, biologically that works out, that a child is born circumcised, you still have to draw a little bit of blood for the mitzvah. Nonetheless, it seems like there was a special energy around that. As I mentioned yesterday, when Pharaoh's daughter opens the basket and sees the child, so she's approached by the sister, by Miriam. That's another example of this, the same idea. Miriam is watching and waiting to see what happens. And then the daughter of Pharaoh rescues the child. And then Miriam is there, so she says, I have a wet nurse. I have a perfect woman to nurse the child, and makes the shidduch, makes the connection between the baby and the baby's mother, Yocheved. And that's something that wouldn't have happened if she wasn't standing there. So again, sometimes we don't know what our actions are going to do, but we still have to do it. We still have to do it. Joy, go ahead.
Also, even if her arm didn't stretch like Plastic Man, she sent her maidservant out there. That's one translation. So it's from her doing it that the baby was still came. Even if it wasn't her hand, it was
Correct.
her direction.
Correct.
To bring the baby back.
Beautiful. Right. So either way, either interpretation, whether a miracle happened with her arm or whether she sent the maidservant, either way, it was it was her actions that triggered it. Mark is writing, Rashi says that Moses was good because the entire house was filled with light. Yes. Good. Okay. Now, one more thing before we jump into the new reading 3. So she names, who gives him the name Moshe? Moses. It is the daughter of Pharaoh. Moses' real name, given by his parents, was not Moshe, was not Moses. This is something that maybe we don't always remember. But Moshe wasn't called Moshe at birth. He was given a different name. The Talmud there are different sages that have different traditions as to what his given name was, but this is a name that he got a few months into his life with this episode of the water. Why was he called Moshe? Again, Moses, the English. Moshe, because min hamaya mishisihu. Mishisihu means I drew him from the water. So drew, like drawing forth from some. She drew him from water. That's related to the name Moshe. Okay. What's interesting is that name stuck. We know Moshe as Moshe based on the name of the daughter of Pharaoh. We don't know him with his original name, his Hebrew name. We know him from this daughter of Pharaoh, maybe Egyptian name. That's how we know him. And that again speaks to the credit and the honor that we give to the daughter of Pharaoh for rescuing. We don't say, oh yeah, she did something minor in the story and we want to overlook that or gloss that over in the origin story. No, she did something incredible. And she's honored that her name becomes the name that he is known by in Torah, by the name given by the daughter of Pharaoh. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Yes?
What is the Hebrew name again?
There are different opinions. Let's see if Rashi cites them. I know the Talmud goes through it. Let's see if or the Medrash, see if the Talmud mentions it. No. Sorry, let's see if Rashi does not mention it here. I feel like, I'm blanking on it. There was it's on the tip of my tongue and I'm blanking on it. Maybe Yedidya or something, or maybe not. Maybe, I don't know. I don't remember. There's a few different options that are given amongst the sages as to what the name was. Okay, we'll have to look that up. Now, let's continue to jump in. Now we have the formative years. What happened? How does Moses grow up and become the man that God will choose to lead the Jewish people? Here we go. Reading 3 for Tuesday, Exodus chapter 2, verse number 11. Now, listen to this. We're going to have 3 stories. And I want, the Torah tells us in rapid succession, 3 stories about Moses. I want you to look at the stories. And I'm going to ask you a question after we read the stories. What is the common denominator between all 3 stories? Here we go. Story number 1. Now, it came to pass in those days that Moses grew up and he grew up in the palace and went out to his brothers and looked at their burdens. Again, he was not enslaved because he grew up in the palace. So he went out to his brothers. He knew he was Jewish, went out to his brothers and looked at their burdens. And he saw an Egyptian man striking a Hebrew man of his brothers. This Egyptian man was beating a Jew, a Hebrew man. So Moses turned this way and that way, looked, both ways, and he saw that there was no man. So he struck the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Struck the Egyptian means he struck and killed the Egyptian. Hid him in the sand means he buried him in the sand. So Moses is stopping. Now, this is per Jewish law. If you see somebody beat up someone to the point of killing them, you're allowed to step in, even if it takes a mortal blow to stop the assailant. It's called rodef, saving a life. So Moses sees this Egyptian man beating up this Jewish guy and beating him severely. So Moses intervenes, rescues the Jewish man's life by taking the Egyptian man's life. But before he steps in, he looks both ways to make sure that no one sees Moses, the palace boy, defending the Hebrew. You with me on this story? Yes? Okay, let's continue. That's story number 1. Story number 2. He went out the next day, day 2, in our story. And behold, 2 Hebrew men were quarreling. And he said to the wicked one, which was going to strike the other guy, why are you going to strike your friend? Lama sakariecha, l'rash, he said to the wicked one, why are you striking your friend? And this fellow retorted, who made you a man, a prince, and a judge over us? In English, we might say, who died and made you God or something or whatever. Who made you a man, a prince, and a judge over us? Listen to this. Do you plan to slay me as you have slain the Egyptian? Wow. You see that? Some Jewish rhetorical chutzpah, right? Moses is trying to intervene in a fight between 2 Jews, 2 Hebrews. And he says to the assailant, stop hitting your friend. He says, are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian yesterday? Moses at that point became frightened and he said, indeed, the matter has become known. What does that mean? Words out. I looked both ways before striking the Egyptian yesterday. I thought no one knew, but clearly by today, the rumor has spread. Somebody saw it and it's now been the gossip, at least amongst the Hebrews. Once it's become known, it's a very short order for Pharaoh to find out. And indeed, in the very next verse, the Torah tells us that Pharaoh himself heard of this incident. He heard of Moses killing the Egyptian taskmaster, and he sought to slay Moses. In other words, that was a capital offense. At that point, Pharaoh realizes that this Jewish kid that his daughter had adopted when she found him on the Nile River, that he raised as his own son, grandson, whatever, he's now defending the Hebrews by killing Egyptian taskmasters. Done. That's it. That Moses we got to get rid of Moses. That's it. So he sought to slay him. So Moses, in turn, fled from before Pharaoh. Moses ran away for his life. And he stayed in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Midian was another country. So the Torah is compressing time, obviously, but here's what happened. Day 1, Egyptian beating up Jew, Moses strikes the Egyptian. Day 2, Jew on Jew fighting, Moses intervenes. The fellow says with chutzpah, "You're going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" Moses says, "Oh, I'm in trouble." Pharaoh hears about it. Moses needs to run away for his life, and he goes to the land of Midian. And he sat down by a well. Now, you know that at wells, that's when people meet each other. So you wouldn't be surprised to know that happens here as well. Now, the chief of Midian, he was a priest of Midian, the spiritual leader of Midian. His name was Yisro or Jethro, had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and they filled their troughs to water their father's flocks. This is story number 3, by the way. But the shepherds came, the male shepherds, and drove these girls away. So Moses got up and rescued them and watered their flocks. Moses, chivalrous Moses, chivalrous, yeah. He acts with chivalry, and he rescues the Midian, Jethro's daughters, to help them give water to the flocks of their father. Now they came to their father, so these girls came to their father Reuel. He had multiple names, Jethro, Yisro, Reuel, whatever. It's one of his names. He had different, I don't know why, pseudonyms. So they came to their father, and he said, "Why have you come so quickly today?" It seems like they would get harassed on a regular basis, and they would have to wait until the other shepherds left before they watered their animals. But this day, because Moses rescued them and intervened, they were able to come back much quicker. So the father says, "Why are you why are you back so early today?" They replied, "An Egyptian man rescued us from the hands of the shepherds, and he also drew water for us and watered the flocks. This stranger stood up for us." He said to his daughters, "So where is he?" You left him, the prince in shining armor. You left by the well. Why have you left man? Invite him and let him eat bread. You should have brought him in. He sounds like a nice guy. He had 7 daughters, right? He's looking for a nice young man. And the local shepherds apparently are no fun. Moses consented, so they went back and they got. So Moses consented to stay with the man, and the man gave his daughter Tzipporah to Moses. Happily ever after. Once again, he met his wife at the well. So what happens? Again, he has to run away. Moses has to run away from Egypt. Pharaoh wants to kill him because he killed the Egyptian. He lands in Midian. He's by the well. He sees this harassment happening. He comes to the rescue of these young women. They go home. They tell their father. The father says, "Invite him over." Next thing you know, he's marrying the oldest daughter, Tzipporah. All right, let's continue. It's a nice story, right? Happily ever after. Tzipporah bore him a son, and he named him Gershom, which means stranger there. For he said, "I was a stranger in a foreign land," because he's not at home. He's not in Egypt. He's not in Israel. He's in Midian now. Now it came to pass in those, so that's okay. So now we've kind of not closed, but now we know about Moses. Now the narration goes to the bigger picture. Let's look at verse 23. Now it came to pass in those many days that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed from their labor, and they cried out, and their cry ascended to God from the labor. God heard their cry, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God saw the children of Israel, and God knew, which means, as you can see, the wheels are turning, so to speak, in redemption, in Exodus. It's kind of like, we have the Moses story, and Moses kind of rises on some level to some measure of, hero and chivalry. And then at the same time, God is paying attention to what's going on with his people, with the Jewish people, with the children of Israel, and God remembers, God knows, and that's the beginning, as foreshadowing God intervening in this situation. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, a ton of stuff. Maybe we'll pick it up some tomorrow, but I want to share with you at least some of the insights, practical insights, deep insights, commentaries on what we studied in this reading. So let me go back. Number one, there are three stories. Story number one, Moses kills the Egyptian. Story two, Moses breaks up the fight between two Jews. And story three, Moses defends the shepherdesses, the daughters of Reuel, of Jethro. I want to ask you a question. I told you I'm going to ask you a question on these three stories. Here's my question. What is the common denominator? What is common to all three of these Moses origin stories or coming of age stories? What's common, Joy?
He helps those that need help, that he steps up and helps people that can't help themselves.
Perfect. When he sees injustice, when he sees something wrong, when he sees the vulnerable or the weak getting picked on or attacked, he doesn't turn a blind eye. It's not my business. Who am I getting involved? He steps in. I could not have said that any better myself. And it's true whether it's non-Jew on Jew, Jew on Jew, or non-Jew on non-Jew. Are you with me on that? Doesn't matter who is the victim. It doesn't matter who is the one who is defenseless. Whether it's the Egyptian against the Hebrew, or a Hebrew against the Hebrew, or Midianite against Midianite. It does not matter. If there's something that's wrong, if there's something that's unjust, Moses is stepping in. We think about, what's the greatness of Moses? There's so many things to think about, so many things to discuss when we, wrap around, Moses and who he was and his legacy. The first three stories we know about Moses, what he does. I mean, we know what's done to him. He's put in a basket and he's rescued. But the first three stories of what he does as a young adult, like, what are the choices that he makes? The choices that he makes are to step in when something wrong is happening. That's powerful. And that's a message for us. Do we turn a blind eye to injustice? Do we say, oh, not my business, not my problem, I got my own stuff to worry about? He could have said that. He could have ignored the Egyptian beating up the Jew. He could have ignored the Jew, about to strike the other Jew. He could have ignored the Midianite shepherds harassing the young women. He could have ignored it. Not my business. Not my issue. Not my circus. You guys deal with your own stuff. I got my own stuff to deal with. No. He doesn't shy away from conflict. Frankly, he does not mind getting involved and not only speaking up for what's right, but acting, right? Acting for what's right, doing for what's right.
Rabbi?
Okay.
Rabbi?
Yeah, Donna.
But when he was in Pharaoh's palace, when he grew up, I mean, how did he retain the Jewish aspect, the Hebrew aspect?
Excellent question. That's a really good question. So I don't know. You have to look in the tradition of the Midrash and the Talmud to see what they say about, Moses' life before, this story right here. That story really, that changes that at that point he's out of Egypt pretty much, and then he returns, with God's command. But what was he do? How old was he? What was he doing up until then? These are good questions. We know that he lived for many, many decades in Midian. He was 80 years old when he returns back to Egypt per God's command to rescue the Jewish people, because he was 80. He died at 120, right? He died on his 120th birthday, and he was 40 years as the leader of the Jewish people. From the Exodus to his passing was 40 years. So he was 80 years old. So of those first 80 years, how many were in the palace and how many were in Midian? It's discussed somewhere. I don't have the exact numbers, but what was his Jewish life like in the palace? He clearly knew who he was. Did he have some secret Torah study sessions? Did he have some secret collaborations on the side? I don't know.
But also when he's Midian,
Sure.
married to he's with non-Jews as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's in a non-Jewish environment. Look, our understanding is that, he knew who he was, and when he married Tzipora, that she embraced monotheism, which is essentially converting. In other words, and this is true of all the, of all the people then, and frankly now, as long as you embrace the faith, that's essentially, it's pretty much what it is. I mean, yeah, there's technicalities. You have to know what you're embracing. So you have to study. You have to consent to, to Judaism. Okay, great. That means embracing it. And then there's the mikvah and whatever. But essentially, right, it's saying, I'm in. I'm on board. So that's what happened. We understand that Tzipora did embrace his faith. But yeah, he lived in a very foreign environment for many years, for many decades.
But it also seems that he was always a stranger in a foreign land. He went from the Hebrews as a baby to the palace, then to Midian, then to the desert. He never made it to Canaan.
I agree with you.
But he was with his people.
I agree with you. You're right. He's separated from his family, separated from his community in Midian, and then he finally comes back at the age of 80. But even then, he's with his people, as you just said, with his community. But yeah, he lived a very, not the easiest life. I mean, we talk about him as, the great Moses with glory, but you could definitely look at it a bit of a different way. One thing that I also want to mention, take a look, verse 14, another insight that I wanted to share with you. So when, this is the second story where he's trying to fight between two Hebrews. So he says, hey, why are you hitting your friend? And the guy says, oh, you're going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian. So it says, Moses became frightened and said, indeed, the matter has become known. So on a simple level, the way I explained it before is the matter has become known. Oh no, the word's out that I killed the Egyptian. Pharaoh's going to find out, and then I'm going to be a wanted man, which is exactly what happened. But there's another explanation. Indeed, the matter has become known means now I know why the Jews are enslaved. In other words, Moses became frightened. Until then, he was wondering, what could the Jews have done to deserve slavery? But now he knows that they beat up each other, right? They're not always kind with each other. And when you try to intervene, they accuse you of being the bad guy. So he's like, oh no, there's friction. There's friction amongst the Jews themselves. And he says, indeed, the matter has become known. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that in the last series that we just concluded in Kabbalah and Coffee, this verse was cited as a source in Torah about the devastation of inter-community fighting. In other words, of not getting along with their neighbors and friends and fellow human beings. It's this idea of fighting, that the interpersonal conflict that leads to exile. And that's what Moses is saying. The matter has become known. I know why there's exile. It's because of this friction. Again, that's not a literal meaning, but that's a bit of an allegorical meaning, or a midrashic meaning, or a mystical meaning about the dangers of conflict. Okay, what else did I want to share with you quickly? By the way, they refer to him, the daughters, when they report back to their father, an Egyptian man has rescued us, not a Hebrew. So he appeared like an Egyptian, not immediately like a Hebrew. What else did I want to mention? Okay, I think that's it for today. I think that's pretty much all I got for right now. Let me see. Oh, Rashi has another take on Egyptian striking the Hebrew. Yeah, let's actually pull up Rashi. Thanks for reminding me. Rashi says a bit of a different story. Take a look. Take a look at this. The guy who was the taskmaster, who was beating the Jewish man in the first story. Take a look at this. He was lashing out and driving him, and the Hebrew man was the husband of Shalomit, the daughter of Dibri. So what happened? The taskmaster laid his eyes on this woman, Shalomit. So he woke the Hebrew at night and took him out of his house And the taskmaster returned and entered the house and was intimate with his wife, while she thought he was her husband. Are you with me on this? Basically, the Egyptian taskmaster had his eyes on this Jewish woman. So he basically forces the Jew out of the house, sneaks into bed with the wife, and is intimate with her. She thinks it's her husband. The man returned home and became aware of the matter. When that Egyptian saw that he become aware of the matter, he struck him and drove him all day. In other words, so the Egyptian, attacked, raped this guy. I mean, I don't know, however you call it. Yeah, I mean, essentially, because she didn't know what was going on. This guy's wife. And then when the husband finds out, so then on top of all of that, he starts beating up the Jew. That's when Moses stepped in, just so you know a little bit about the backstory of this. He turned this way and that. Rashi says, yeah, he saw what this Egyptian had done to him in the house and in the field, right? He did two abuses. Number one, what he did with his wife, and what he did to him, beating him up in the field. Also, he saw that there was no man, Rashi says, he saw that there was no man destined to be descended from this Egyptian who would become a proselyte convert. In other words, he saw that there were no future descendants that would become members of the tribe. So he said, all right, I can take him out. No collateral damage with this guy. Anyway, all right, so that's it. That's just a little bit filling in a little bit of the story of some of the background of the story of story one.
All right.
But what we see here today, to just conclude this, what we see here are the three coming of age stories of Moses. And Moses, in his coming of age stories, there's one thing that we know about him. He stands up for justice. He's not afraid to jump into conflict. He's not afraid to get his hands dirty, and he will never be silent in the face of wrongs being committed. No matter who is doing it, and no matter who is on the receiving end, he will stand up for those that cannot stand up for themselves. Powerful lesson for all of us. And I'm not going to give you a playbook, how to apply it in your own life, but all of us, whatever it means to us, we must apply these lessons of the Torah. Torah is meant to be an instruction book for us, an instruction manual for life. We must apply these lessons from Moses about how to live our lives. Mark?
Yeah, on the 14th pasuk, this is interesting. When the Hebrews were quarreling with each other and Moses intervened, it said, are you saying that you're going to kill me? And what Rashi says about that is, from here we learn that Moses killed the Egyptian through uttering God's quintessential ineffable name.
Yeah, excellent. Yes. Yes, that's one explanation that Rashi cites. In fact, in the Talmud, there are three opinions as to how Moses killed the Egyptian. Either with God's name, he recited God's name, and that struck down the Egyptian, or with his fist, or with a shovel. A shovel, fist, or divine name. One year, some years ago, we had a Torah studies class, a Wednesday night class on the three opinions. And we said, how do we combat anti-Semitism? We have to use all three approaches: the fist, the shovel, and the name. Number one, we have to be strong. We have to have a strong Israel, a strong idea. We have to be strong and not be afraid. The fist. The shovel, we have to build institutions. We have to lobby. We have to have whatever it is, whatever lobbying institutions, AIPAC, et cetera, to support our efforts and our interests. So we have to build institutions and dig and JCCs and federations. We have to be strong with infrastructure. So the fist, the shovel, and the divine name, I probably don't have to interpret too much. It means we also have to have our faith in God, prayer, and Torah study. Three paths, three touch points to combat anti-Semitism, as Moses did: the fist, the shovel, and the name. Thank you for reminding me of that with Rashi's interpretation about the name. There's two more. And as I've said in many classes, in many different contexts, so often each one turns within our own ranks, turns against the other. Like the religious Jew looks at the Federation Jew and says, you're wasting your time. You need to be in synagogue all day. And the Federation Jew looks at you know where I'm going with this, right? Everyone says it's this way and not the other way. And in truth, as it says with Moses, three opinions, but all three, we can take the approach that all three are valid, which means we need to be strong, we need to have diplomacy, and we also need to have our spiritual connection intact. And if we're in one way or the other, we have to try to create balance in our life at the most, but at the very least, ideally, we create the balance and touch on all three aspects within ourselves. But at the very least, we have to respect the other who's doing the other job that we're not doing. At the very least, we should respect the other. So if we're not lobbying, Washington for Jewish and Israeli interests, okay, because that's not our thing. We're more of the Torah study, person. Okay, but let's not look, side-eyed at that. Let's appreciate that and respect the ones that are following the other approaches. All right, enough said on that. And okay, so that's it for today. Tomorrow, I didn't check the weather recently, but it looks beautiful outside. I was outside earlier. It seemed I had a jacket on, but it seemed very lovely for my walk down the block to the library. So here's my point. My point, yeah, it's right here at the corner. It's like the easiest thing. So here's what I'm saying. Tomorrow, again, pending, with the exception of a storm brewing in that I'm not aware of, we will be in person doing a hybrid DPP, in person and online. You know me, right? Outside, I'm squinting because it's sunny sometimes, right? That's how it's going to look online. In person, you'll be able to see me also squinting. But that's tomorrow, 12 o'clock. Put your orders in with Spicy Peach. We'll pick it up and have it ready for the new class. That's for tomorrow. And also, please take a look at that event coming up in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from tonight. You do not want to miss this. Jewish bioethics. You are going to be astounded, absolutely mind blown from Jewish medical wisdom on what's going on in our world, both technologies that we are aware of and maybe even some things that we're not aware of. Like, for example, there's technology today that can edit genetic code. CRISPR, CRISPR, CRISPR gene editing technology. It's emerging tech, but it's starting to be used. Question is, ethical, unethical, halachically legal or not so legal, right? A good thing or a negative thing. Bioethicists around the world are exploring this. We're going to have an opportunity to hear from a leading Jewish scholar in this field discussing these situations, as well as the vaccine and other things related to our life and emerging medical frontiers. So you don't want to miss this. He is a pleasure to listen to. He is a brilliant man, but also speaks to everybody and makes very complex medical topics very understandable. So join me 2 weeks from tonight, January 19th, for this very special event. All right.
Can we invite other people?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm always open. I mean, we're online, so yeah, the more the merrier. All right.
Comic class is
Tonight, yes, I'm going to send out an email right now, right after this class. Tonight, Talmud class, lesson 4. Bring a glass of wine as we have the siyum, the grand finale, as we wrap up the Talmud to the 2 dots. And if you don't know what 2 dots are, join tonight to find out what the not mythical, but what the legendary 2 dots in Talmud refer to. So join tonight for the conclusion of decoding Talmud and reaching the 2 dots. What else? I think that's it for today. Matt, good to see you. Sandrine, Mark, Donna, Ray. It's a pleasure.
Likewise.
It's a pleasure and a privilege. All right. We'll see you all. Have a wonderful day. See you later tonight. See you soon. Of course.
Thank you. Yes, go on.
See you all.